So, but and maybe it's the end of Windows on devices, and because so my kind of feel is, and I think we talked about this before, that I think we've already crossed over the point where more new applications being created, even within enterprises, are not native Windows apps. They're creating web apps and or a device native for iOS or whatever it happens to be. Now that doesn't mean that organizations are running a majority of non-Windows apps. It just means that of the new apps that are created. So there's going to be a atrophy period of I don't know, 20 years, whatever. But at some point we're going to get to the point where, so fine, maybe today, 60% of our apps are Windows apps, and then tomorrow, in 2 years is 50, and then 40, and at some point, we're going to get down to where only 10 to 20% of our Windows apps are. We're only 20 to 20% of our apps are Windows apps, and I think we're all going to ask ourselves, does it make sense to support this massive Windows desktop architecture just for that 15% of apps that require Windows? And perhaps at that point, that's where we take those last remaining Windows apps, move them off of the desktop into the data center. Maybe it's a terminal server model, maybe it's a VDI, spawned instantly model, or whatever it's going to be, and those are delivered remotely. And so the last desktop-based, incidentally, apps are in the data center, and now we don't have to worry about managing the Windows platform on the device. And maybe the Windows OS, maybe that's what Windows on ARM is, because maybe the Windows OS, sure, it's still going to exist because you will have to have an OS on a device, and you'll have Windows on ARM or iOS or Android or whatever, but organizations are not dealing with the fact that Windows is on these devices.
Yeah, and in that management of that image, whether that image is at desktop under your PC or that image is on one of these ARM or iOS devices, is probably what's causing the CIO to scratch his head right now, figuring out how to do that. I mean, that's where all of the expenses are. That's what drives you to want to do something like a Zen app or a virtualization. Uh, in addition to that, that's what fueling today companies like Atlantis that are solving those problems with the image. With all of those type of companies out there, the fact that they're making so much money, and Landesk and Big Fix and those guys like that, if they could come out a way to that you would reduce those costs for maintaining that image, then that device will win, because it's those expenses are the ones that kill you. The labor intensive ones are what are driving us to try to get rid of that PC under our desk, with its meantime between failures, and the the move to virtualization is one of the reasons people are trying to do that. Security and compliance, of course, are the other reasons. But managing that image on that device is, if Microsoft figures that out in a great way, then they could be a winner in this. A lot of risk involved, I agree, but they could be a winner.
Well, now, and Sanofsky did mention that and we knew this before, I think, that with Metro, the Metro style interface and these Windows Store apps, they will have isolation built in. So, which is, I think, exactly how the Android platform works and how the iOS platform works. So, you won't, because all the apps are coming through the Windows Store, you won't have to deal with regression testing and compatibility and all that kind of stuff. So it occurs to me as you're talking that there is two different windows here. Like, we are seeing the divergence now, that the old Windows, where you have desktop apps that are not curated through the Windows Store, have all the compatibility issues, and that can sort of move now into the cloud in the next 5 or 10 years, and it'll live on for another 50 years. But we can get that off of our desktops, and then our desktops do move to that full curated model, especially if it's an ARM desktop, obviously, where everything's sort of tested and very modular. And then in that case, you don't need a Landesk or a Big Fix or Altiris for Windows on ARM, just like you don't need it for these Android or for iOS. So now MDM, man, how's so Jack, you're doing this study of these different mobile device management vendors, then what if there's an evolution? So we call it MDM for mobile device management, which
Which is DM.
yeah, DM for like the desktop management, or historically, but now it's just called DM.
Device. You mean one D for both devices and desktops?
No, what's the difference between I mean, mobile device
Desktop
management
devices
versus
are the same.
Yeah, it was MDM and DDM before, but if the new desktops that are running Metro only can get apps from the Windows Store, and the apps are already tested that they're not going to conflict and all that kind of stuff and everything, so we don't have to do traditional desktop management on these devices. So a lot of the kind of stuff that we do traditionally in the old school Windows world, we don't need to do. So I wonder if we see mobile device management expanding to just plain device management, and it manages your laptop as easily as your BlackBerry, as easily as your tablet, as easily as your
And
Android.
it manages, this application has a password around it, but the password to get into the whole device is only 4 digits and things like that. And you can open this file with this other application, but not this application. And it's the same for the desktop and for the tablet and for the phone.
If all that stuff is predictable, it's not so much of a wild, wild west, and that's what that's what all the solutions out there today do. Are they kind of help tame the wildness that is Windows right now? And so, but if all of that stuff is predictable, then it's more just who has the best management capabilities centralized, because all the devices, we know what they're going to do, we know how to control them, we know how to configure them, and so on. So yeah, I mean, maybe the line is going to not be very it'll be blurry between the two devices now.
But you mentioned which device has the best management capabilities, and
I mean, which package? Not the devices. I figure they're all going to have the same abilities to be managed. So it comes down to which management package does things the best way.
But this, like this, for example, this new BlackBerry Playbook in my hand, and the Windows 8 ARM tablet, you're going to be able to manage those more completely than you're able to manage an iPad, because, Apple being Apple, there's still things that you can have all the mobile device management software you want, and there's still that stuff that you can't touch. And
I mean, with between individual devices. So I'm talking when I say that each device will be equally managed, I mean that each Windows on ARM device will be equally manageable, and each Android tablet or device will be equally manageable, and each iPad, but not compared to each other. Because you're right. I mean, the iOS device is not nearly as manageable. There's not nearly as much stuff exposed to the native hardware, that kind of a thing. So yeah, you're right in that regard.
Although Jack was telling me yesterday that that Android is actually can be more secure to manage than iOS.
If you completely replace the build of the Android OS that you're using with something custom that has all the management built in, because then you have
the device.
Then you can have access to absolutely everything, which is a heck of a lot more than you get access when you're managing an iOS device.
But it's true.
So the device is more secure, not the OS.
Well, but it's still Android. I mean,
the device using your own custom Android build is more secure.
Because you can build, it's just like how they had in the old days, like the hardened version of Unix, and there's a Windows version of stuff too, And so, because Android is open, an MDM vendor could make their own Android build that was just super, super locked down, and they can go through every line of all that code and make it happen, and then you've got the most securest device. I mean, it's as secure as Linux.
That's a niche market at best, in my opinion, though. I mean, you're going to see the maybe one day in the future you'll see the UPS driver with his own Android device that you sign for your package, but I don't see that going out to the masses. If we wanted to manage OSs like that, we would have replaced Windows on our desktops with Linux a long time ago.
We couldn't have, though, because there was no Linux apps.
But as soon as that goes out of date, and as soon as Cherry Creamsicle comes out, or whatever the hell the next version of Android would be. As soon as that comes out, it's going to have new features and people are going to revolt. And then we've got the same situation we have now. We've got this stodgy, old, crappy OS that makes things harder to do than what they are out in the real world. And then we go, then we have the users revolting and going getting the new devices with the new features and trying to use those in organizations. And then we have a whole new FUIT play.